These are the governors of West Virginia that came from the Parkersburg area.
So we have Jacob Jackson from 1881. Now that fella here, he's not.
That's white.
That's white.
Looks like he has a sticker came down. And then there's the second governor. Technically he's the third governor.
Okay, William Stevenson. Okay.
And there's the first governor.
Borman, yeah. Okay.
And that's his wife.
Lorraine Borman, yeah. All right.
Stevenson and Borman were close friends. They were both lawyers here in town.
Okay.
Although Borman was also an oil man. And I'm not sure Stevenson was really in oil. But he looks to be like, I don't know whether you remember David Niven or not. He was a popular actor during the 1940s and 50s.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
He did quite a few. But anyway, he also looks like a riverboat gambler.
He is very distinguished looking, yes.
He is. He's very distinguished. And that's the type of character David Niven played.
Okay.
Distinguished.
Yeah. Got the very southern look to him. So what are these here? Let's see.
These are some old receipts there. These are old newspapers. And there's something. A lot of them are still listed as Parkersburg, Virginia.
Let's see, nice. The State Journal, Parkersburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
Parkersburg Gazette, nice.
And here's another Gazette copy. This is an original.
Yeah.
This, I think, is a copy.
Wow.
We actually got this off the internet.
11/22/1856. Wow.
And it was Virginia at that time.
Yeah.
And these were some of the movers and shakers of the Parkersburg area.
Yeah, we see Camden's name around. Wasn't he also a senator?
Yes. He was a senator, but he was also an oil man.
Okay.
And that's who the Camden Clark Hospital is named after.
Right.
He's the Camden of Camden Clark.
And
This
here's
is one of the Rathbones.
Yeah. John Valo Rathbone. Okay.
And this is Charles Shattuck, an oil man.
I don't know anything about him.
And well, he built what they called the Inner City Railroad, which is basically a streetcar system. He built that in Parkersburg, and he also connected Marietta with that. So they ran regular trips to Marietta every day. And he also had Shattuck Park, which is on the south side of the Kanawha River. And at one time, West Virginia held the state fair there for probably about 10 years. So he was a very wealthy man. His house is still standing up in the Juliana district up there.
Okay. Nice.
He was a very wealthy man. He was grew up over around Athens. And right out of high school, he moved in here and made his fortune here. But this is what the Camden of Camden Clark looked like.
Mm-hmm. Afraid to touch these old books here.
Yeah,
These are really old.
Yes, they are. Some of them I'd like to see them put back so people aren't really thumbing through them. They don't thumb through them too much, but they are very old.
Kind of looked like a catalog of some sort.
And that's what it looks like. This can here, when they built the courthouse, they put a time capsule in it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And that was built and it finished in 1899. So in 1999 they opened it up. Some of the stuff actually survived.
What'd they do with it?
The city's got it.
Okay.
Or the county, I'm not sure which. Of course the courthouse belongs to the county,
But at least you got the box.
but the county I think has all the papers and stuff that survived. But this, they gave us the box.
Nice.
That's nice too.
It is.
I think that's lead too. I think that was made out of lead, which means the box is going to survive. The problem is, is there enough moisture trapped inside to destroy papers and stuff over 100 years? And these are part of the Rathbones. Now here, she did something a very few, at that time, women just didn't do. I think it's about toward the bottom of this.
First woman to drive a car across the U.S. in 1909. Well, isn't that interesting?
And that was quite an accomplishment back then. Now, we haven't had these paintings too long. They're about 160 years old. And these are the original frames. When we got them, as you can see, the frames had some problems with them. The pictures had some damage. And the art gallery up here made the repairs on them, and they did a very good job.
Have you come across anybody named Rathbone today that claims to...
There's still some Rathbones in this area. There's a guy, they call him Vince. His name's Vincent Rathbone. And he's, as a matter of fact, he owned this building at one time. And he's still living.
Fascinating.
And he's got a couple kids still living in the area. Although, from what I understand, though, Vince's in pretty bad shape. Wow.
The Rathbones owned this building at one time. That's interesting. Fitting, then, that it should become an oil and gas museum.
Well, it's even more so, yeah.
Wow.
Now, these pictures, most of these pictures over here were taken in 1899. I think it's 99. Slide it over here. 97. Most of these were taken in 1897. They were donated by Sarah Smoot Work.
Smooth theater girl, right.
Yes, from the Smoot Theater, the same Smoot family. And these were actually taken by a company in Chicago. And they published it almost like a magazine. You subscribe to it, and they called it artwork of wherever they was at. And this was artwork of Wood County. And these are pictures from Parkersburg in 1897. So it's
Nice.
and the hotel there is still standing, still in operation.
Right.
It was about 10 years old when that picture was taken.
Wow. The Blennerhassett Hotel at 10 years old.
And it's still, they had a fire in there at one time. It didn't gut the whole thing, but they did have to shut it down for repairs. But it is continuously operated except for that short period of time that they had to make the repairs.
Huh. It's like the Lafayette Hotel had a fire, burned it down once. Interesting.
And these doors actually came from the Blennerhassett Hotel. Now here's an interesting.
Oh, wow. Huh. The doors came from the hotel.
Here's a check that Borman wrote to himself. And it has his signature and everything on it.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Well, it was $100.
Yep.
Back at that time, $100 was a lot of money.
1869.
That was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was.
And some interesting artifacts here. Now this, we have some pictures over in the other bay that actually work in this of volcano.
I think I've seen those on TV. You slide them back and forth, and
Well, they have the new version is what they call Viewmaster.
yeah,
This is the same thing except this is the old version of it.
yeah.
Stereo. That's what you said, stereo.
Yeah.
Or 3D. Not stereo, 3D. Yeah.
So here's more, getting closer to the
Yeah.
Civil War area here.
Now, these are the movers and the shakers of, well, these were three of the primary people that's involved in the formation of the state. The guy in the middle is Borman, our first governor. And this is Van Winkle. Are you familiar with him at all?
I mean, I've heard of Rip Van Winkle, but I think maybe there's a name connection.
He is some relation to Rip Van Winkle.
Okay.
Rip Van Winkle was a real character.
Was he?
Yes.
Okay.
He was. Remember the Andy Griffith show?
Yeah, of course. I just went to Mayberry 2 weeks ago.
Otis Campbell,
Yeah.
the town drunk.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what Rip Van Winkle was.
Okay.
Town
Okay.
drunk up in the Catskills of New York.
So that makes sense. So you got too drunk, you slept for 100 years. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that. And Blair, Jacob Blair.
Blair's the one that went in and talked to Lincoln about signing the papers to make West Virginia a state. And this is the Swan House Hotel, which is right down here at the point where the two rivers come together.
Oh, that's right. I just read about it. Yeah, Blair.
And this is where all the research and everything went into making West Virginia a legal state. And there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through and everything, but they did it in roughly 2 years.
The Swan House Tavern. Okay.
That was a hotel, and they had a tavern. Of course, most hotels had a bar in there too. The supplements of, and there's Jackson. He's actually related to Stonewall Jackson.
General J.J. Jackson, representative to Virginia Secession Convention. Fascinating. There's Stevenson, William Stevenson, chaired the Constitutional Convention and became the second West Virginia governor. Okay.
Technically, he was the third.
Oh, yeah, that's the guy in there. That's okay. Look at him. Yeah, that's the guy we were talking about. Yeah, his face. You can't miss that. General Carnes.
He was at Morning Springs,
Okay.
and then I can't think. Cook. He was the first mayor of Parkersburg.
James Cook, first mayor of Parkersburg. That name's important to us too. Okay. Wow.
Are you familiar with the GAR?
The Grand Army of the Republic.
Right. It started out as a social group.
Oh, did it?
As they were people that were veterans of the Civil War for the Union side. And they would meet every so often and reminisce about their war adventures and keep friendships up. And so, but they became politically active very early on. Because can you imagine the United States promising veterans a whole bunch of stuff and then not deliver?
Nah, that never happens.
Well, it happened for the Civil War too.
I bet.
And they came very political over that.
Okay.
We saved your country, we saved the country, and you promised us if we do that, we would get this and this and whatever, and you're not giving it to us. Oh, they kind of embarrassed the United States. But they didn't go down and burn buildings and everything.
Right, right.
But they did hold a lot of rallies and really bad publicity for the government. And finally, they didn't get everything back, but they got a nice chunk of it back.
Well, good. Good for them.
Now, there is a version of the GAR still around, but you have to prove that you are a direct descendant of a veteran of the Civil War on the Union side.
Okay.
Now, the Confederacy has the same thing. They call it the Sons of the Confederacy.
Okay.
And if you can prove you're a direct descendant of a veteran of the Confederacy, you can get into the club too. But once they ran out of veterans, they had to kind of open it up to.
Makes sense.
And this was the uniform for the GAR. They actually had their own uniforms.
Okay, for the social group. Okay. So they had
The social part.
Yeah, all right. And this is just a little tiny room here we're stepping in here. You got some books on the shelf here. Lee's Lieutenants and book on Sherman,
Some-
Civil
there's
War books.
Books in there that's kind of interesting. Most of them, I think, are dealing with the Civil War.
Okay.
Because this display back in here is the Civil War and Civil War period.
Captain Patterson's Cavalry. He was also in the Revolution. That's interesting. The same name, Patterson. Wow.
Now this is the Jones and Bowden raids, where they burnt the oil fields and everything in Burning Springs.
Oh, like you were talking about earlier. Okay.
That's the whole thing laid out.
Interesting.
Although Parkersburg was the original intended destination, well, one of the stops. But they sent scouts out. They got out around Cairo, Harrisville, out in that area.
Yeah.
And they sent scouts into Parkersburg. And they went back and said, we don't want to raid Parkersburg right now. There's too many federal troops in there. And we just got a little small raiding party, and they got almost a whole regiment. We're not prepared to take on a group. So then they went to Burning Springs.
Okay. Right.
This is Parkersburg at the time of the Civil War. This picture is roughly 1860.
Notably, no bridge.
And that's the Swan House Hotel. Not even a railroad bridge.
Not even a railroad
But
bridge.
there is a bridge here. That was a covered bridge.
The 5th Street Bridge there was covered.
Well, that's not 5th Street. That's the Juliana Street, the old Juliana Street.
Oh, you can see like, oh, I see what you're talking about because there's a foundation to that underneath there. Okay, I always wondered what that was.
There is a pier. This pier is the only pier left. Well, the bridge collapsed. And then when it did, then they cleaned the shipping channel out and they took the center pier out. And then when they put the flood wall in, they tore that pier out. And then there's a picture of Stonewall Jackson visiting Parkersburg.
Wow.
His mother, or his grandmother, she was a Neal and lived right up here on Neal Island. The Neals owned the island at that time. And that was Stonewall Jackson's mother's parents.
And they had a house on Neal Island?
Yes.
And Stonewall Jackson went on Neal Island to visit. Now it's just a little wildlife refuge with nothing on it. I did not know that. Wow.
Although the city of Parkersburg has a couple wells on there.
Yeah, I think I saw them, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the pipe sticks way up in the air.
Yeah.
That's to get the pipe out of a flood area so the flood waters don't contaminate the well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But, and there's an old picture of Grant when he was younger.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a bowling ball.
That's a big cannonball. I didn't see the big one on the floor.
That weighs about 200 pounds.
Wow.
And
I saw the little ones, so I didn't see the big one.
I tell people when they started using that, they was getting serious.
Yeah.
But that, as far as we can tell, and I've actually talked to some ex-Navy artillery people, and they say that these were primarily used by the Navy. When they had wooden ships, that these were used to sink ships.
Okay.
A 200-pound ball traveling at about 300 miles an hour hits the side of a wooden ship, something's going to give.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily have to hit at the water line.
Really?
That would
Because it would
probably
just
take
pull it all. Yeah.
almost the whole side of the ship
I
out.
get you. Yeah. Wow.
So all you had to do was basically hit the ship.
That's a lot of lead there.
Now, that's a, mortar shell inside of it.
Okay.
Now, essentially, a mortar and a cannon are the same weapon, essentially. But there is a difference. It's primarily in the way they're used. A cannon is in a horizontal firing, something like a rifle or something. Or you can elevate it and stuff. But a mortar is shot up like this, and it lobs into the enemy. Mm-hmm. Even though they're essentially the same weapon, but they're designed to be used in two different ways.
Now, you suppose that had explosives in it, or
And
maybe still does?
They did put explosives. This modern day mortar shells has explosives, and they're designed to detonate about 100 feet above the ground, and it just sprays out shrapnel everywhere.
Sure. Well, what about this one? You think it had any?
That I don't think was explosive.
Okay.
Although they did make explosive cannonballs back then.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I don't even know that a mortar shell had actually been developed at that time. I think they sort of modified cannons till they would point almost straight up. But
Yeah.
and then that's how the mortar itself kind of
Right. Makes more sense.
refine that. And these are the uniforms I was telling you about in Sherman's March to the City.
The dress uniforms in remarkably good condition. Donated by Craig and Bonnie Wicks, W-I-X.
I think that's the flag up there. We're looking for a 35-star flag, original. I think that's a 37 there, I think. Or 36.
And we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
36.
Yeah.
West Virginia was the 35th state.
Okay.
But that was only for a period of a few years, and it was during the Civil War. So there wasn't an overabundance of 35 flags made.
Right. That's real rare. What's left of that? It ain't much
You
left
can
of
get
it.
reproduction, but we're interested in finding an original.
No doubt.
We had someone in Cleveland's got one. But they was wanting to trade us for something, and we just didn't have one. He was wanting.
I mean, they got the swords, part of the uniform.
We used to have a Spencer rifle in there, and I don't know where it's at now.
The bayonet that went in and it's still there, or whatever you call that thing at the end. And now, isn't that the right word for it? Bayonet?
That's a bayonet. Yes.
Yeah.
It goes on the end of the rifle. Although I don't think it went on the Spencer.
Okay.
And this is one of the oldest outdoor pictures taken in Parkersburg.
Morton salt.
Could be.
Leander Morton. So this is one of the oldest pictures in Parkersburg.
Taken outside.
August 8, I can't read that. 1861. Yeah, there it is.
That's the Indiana, a regiment from Indiana.
17th Indiana Regiment.
That was
Wow.
for the Civil War.
Is that up there at Fort Borman?
No, this I think is on out like toward 47.
Okay.
The river's just down on the bank down there.
Oh,
There's some flat land and stuff out there, and I think they had an encampment out there. Now, of course, there was a lot of indoor portrait type photographs taken here quite a bit before that. Mm-hmm. As near as we can tell, this is the oldest picture taking outdoors in the Parkersburg area.
Yeah, that's an actual photo, not a drawing.
Yes, that is a photograph.
Wow. Neat.
So, and this couch came out of Arthur Borman's house. He lived just a couple blocks from here.
Germania, Parkersburg, Virginia, 1002. And this looks like I don't know if it's a book. Now here I'm looking at the New York Herald from April 15, 1865. That's the day Lincoln died. Wow.
That was the extra they put out. Like the news bulletin that flashes up on your TV screen. Well, they didn't have TV screens, so they printed an extra newspaper announcing the death of Lincoln.
Wow. The death of the president. Now here they have it listed at 8:10 a.m. and now they tell you all the time that it was 7:22 a.m. Wow. Everything you read now says 7:22, but the time on the newspaper at the time was 8:10.
Well, that may be when the paper was printed. I don't know.
Okay. I just wonder if they're changing things for some reason or other.
But I'm saying he lived approximately 12 hours.
Yeah.
From the time he was shot. He probably shot around 7, 8 in the evening, something like that. Because I think they was about midway through that play when
yeah, sounds
they
about
were
right.
shot.
Uh-huh. A book from Honorable Van Winkle. Wow.
That's kind of a biography of his.
Very
now,
old
Van
and
Winkle,
encased in plastic.
When he was in the Senate, cast a vote that basically changed the course of American history.
Okay.
And you're familiar with Andrew Johnson?
Sure.
Lincoln's vice president.
Uh-huh.
He was impeached, right?
Yeah.
And he stayed in office by
one vote.
One vote.
Van Winkle's vote. Okay.
He was instructed to vote guilty. But when he gets up to make his vote, he makes a little speech. He says, I don't always agree with the man, but for the life of me, I see no reason or nothing that he has done that requires their removal from office. And in good conscience, I have to vote not guilty. Where's Van Winkle on the alphabetical list? There's not much below Van Winkle.
Right.
There was not enough yes votes after that. And if he'd voted yes, he'd have been.
I hear you. Wow. Huh. That's interesting to learn. And here's his book right here. Wow.
And they say, some people say that it cost him his Senate seat. But he was asked about that, and he said no. He says, at that time the senators were appointed, not elected like they are now.
Right.
They was asking him if he wanted to be reappointed. And he said no.
Okay.
And anyway, they asked him, well, why did you turn it down? Was it because of your vote? He said, no, I turned it down because of health reasons. And about a year and a half or so later, he passed away. So I kind of lean toward his answer.
Okay. Wow. I think that couch was owned by Mr. Borman, wasn't it? If I remember.
That couch came from his house. That's a pretty good sized couch. Some people up at Columbus had it. And they called us, and it just so happened Dave McCain was in here when the call came in. We gave the phone to him, and they told him what had. And of course, then they asked a stupid question: would you be interested in this? And of course, yes. He took down every little bit of information how to find that house. He even took down GPS.
Back before you had that. Yeah.
Well, I didn't go that far because GPS really wasn't around at that time. But anyway, he took just about every little bit of information he could get. And the next morning, he rented a truck and was headed to Columbus. He said, I want to get that before they change their mind.
Right. Good for him. Here's a saddlebag or something from the cavalry, maybe. Or, I don't know, some kind of a pouch or something. A soldier. Buttons.
The United States just celebrated the, 160th anniversary of the Civil War. And we got involved with that too. And that's what this little room is all about.
Okay.
And we got a lot of good reports and everything, and we decided, well, we'll just go ahead and keep it here. So.
Some Harper's Weekly. I've can run across a few copies of those in antique stores.
Yeah, they are kind of the Time magazine of old.
And
Death of Robert E. Lee.
The death
He
of
died
General...
very shortly after the Civil War.
1870, yeah.
It's about 5 years afterwards. And then here's a nice painting of him. And that is a real painting. You can feel brush strokes and everything else on that.
Wow.
Gotta get it cleaned up a little bit though.
Yeah.
Had some water leak in here.
I see, yeah.
His horse was from West Virginia. From
Robert E.
Clarksburg.
Lee's white horse was from West Virginia. From Parkersburg?
From Clarksburg.
Didn't know that either.
That time
Wow.
it was Virginia, but
Sure. Old piano. From a hotel from Burning Springs. Nice.
it never made Burning Springs. The guy that owned a hotel ordered it for his hotel. He paid for the piano, but he had it shipped COD. And it got as far as Parkersburg. Came under the river. And anyway, he refused to accept delivery of it because his hotel had burnt down. And he says, I'm not planning on rebuilding it. And I can't play a piano myself. I have no need for this piano. He flatly refused to pay the shipping bill. So they auctioned it off for the price of the shipping bill. Someone got a very nice piano. And we think the strings in here are the original strings.
Interesting.
We think.
Still plays a little, doesn't it? Wow. 150-year-old piano still works. Look at that, a Confederate flag owned by Robert T. Bowe, who used to own the little dairy store down the road. Yeah.
That's supposed to be an authentic flag from the Civil War.
It does appear to be, yes.
It does appear that way. Now, the first land battle of West Virginia was at Philippi, West Virginia. Fort Sumter is considered a sea battle. Fort Sumter was located on an island just off the South Carolina coast.
First Battle of the Rebellion, Philippi, West Virginia. Kind of looks like Philippi or Philippi, yeah.
Well, West Virginia is called Philippi.
Okay.
And a lot of people pronounce it Philippi. It could be pronounced either way.
Well, John Brown, that's...
No, that's a different John Brown.
Yeah, didn't figure.
David, we finally traced down who he was.
Did you?
He was a soldier in the Union Army during the Civil War, stationed right up here on Fort Borman. He was from Maryland. And he, when the Civil War was over, he married a Parkersburg girl, and he made his home here the rest of his life in Parkersburg. Now somehow somebody broke that grave marker, and it was found several miles from where it was supposed to be. But anyway, the Historical Society had a new grave marker made up for him, and they got a hold of some of his direct relatives and invited them to the rededication of the...
That was in the paper just a few years ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
I remember that story.
And
here's your rifle you were looking for, I think.
Yeah.
Is that your rifle that was over there?
No, this is...
Okay, it's a different one.
That over there was a Spencer repeating rifle, and this is an old muzzle loader.
Okay.
Which basically the standard rifle that was used in the Civil War. We think that one should have seen combat in the Civil War too.
Spencer also made rifles. That's interesting.
They made the first successful repeating rifle.
First successful repeating rifle by Spencer.
When I say successful, it's because they were successful in sales.
Okay.
Okay, now this is the original killing and stuff that was in the burger store. What's interesting, this building was built in 1874. They did have a fire in here in the 1880s, and they had to rebuild the inside of the building. In the 1890s, it was rededicated in 1899. But I'm not sure exactly when they opened back up for business. But anyway, we lift these shelves here as part of the history of the building. And we got to get up in there and do some painting, touch-up work. Some of this glass is worth some money, some of it's not.
Sure. There are a lot of interesting little trinkets here. Too many to even name. Just bottles everywhere and ointment, oil cans.
But like I say, some of these bottles are worth some money and some of them aren't.
Right. Old locks. Scale. There's all kinds of things you'd find at a hardware store too, right? Yeah, just...
Now this
is fascinating.
was the first piece of fire equipment that Parkersburg bought.
1854, the first Parkersburg fire wagon, hand-operated. Guys on each side pumping the sides to pump the water through the little hose there.
But we consider this the first piece of fire equipment, but we sort of ignore buckets though.
Yeah.
But probably buckets was just as effective as this was.
Yeah, I don't think it squirted too far, did it?
But it was a beginning to the big monsters we have today.
Sure.
You take it in small steps. Are you familiar with Bernard McDonough?
McDonough now, the name Sounds familiar. There's a park, McDonough Park.
Yes.
So I'm sure the park's named after him.
Well, I'll give you a real brief.
McDonough Room and Library.
This represents his office. And he, let's have a seat there for a minute.
All right.
Take a couple minutes.
Sure. Talking about the McDonough Library here. A room with a bunch of books, old books.
Well, these wasn't actually part of his library, but we decided this room would make a nice little library too. His family immigrated here from Ireland in the 1850s. Originally settled out here, out next to Parkersburg. And then Bernard's grandparents actually had moved to Belfry. Now, I'm not sure that Bernard was alive at this time, but his dad moved to Belfry also and lived here in Belfry for a little while. Then he gets a job with the railroad in Texas, and they moved to San Antonio. Now, I think Bernard was actually born in San Antonio, Texas. But he was about 3 years old, 4, something like that, when his mother died. And his dad didn't have money to pay a nanny. And they had no friends or family out there to look after the kids. So he brought the kids back to Belfry, and the grandparents raised them. And this area was the only home that he knew, because he's only about 3 or 4 years old when he moved here to Belfry. But anyway, he graduated from Belfry High School. Went to work at the old shovel plant we had here.
Ames? Okay.
And he hadn't worked there too long. He makes a statement. He says he didn't like being poor, because his grandparents just barely was able to take on the kids and raise them. But anyway, they got by, but that's about all you can say for it. But anyway, he would have to borrow money sometimes from the guys he worked with for lunch money before next payday rolled around. And that's when he made a statement that he didn't like being poor. Well, you move fast forward a few years, he gets himself fired from the shovel plant. And I have not been able to find out why yet.
Yeah.
But he gets fired. And they take him to the front office there. He
picture while you talk.
he makes, for the paperwork and the final check and everything, and he makes a threat while he's in the office. Nobody paid any attention to it. And I'm sure that they have heard that threat in one version or another. It wasn't a violent threat. He just simply said, one of these days I'm going to own this place and I'm going to fire every last one of you, referring to the people that had a hand in his firing. And I'm sure they'd heard that threat many times. Nobody paid any attention. But 5 years later, he walks in, he says, you get your stuff, get out of here, you're fired. I now own this place. He got his sweet revenge.
And what place was that again?
The shovel plant.
He owned Ames?
Yes.
So he ended up buying Ames? Wow.
And
so McDonough owned the Ames plant. Fascinating.
yes, the world's largest shovel plant.
And then moved to China here 10 years or something ago.
But anyway,
Because they didn't want to pay, what, $10 an hour? Now everybody pays more than that. You can't get a job for $10 an hour now. It's unbelievable.
minimum wage is almost that now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But anyway, the question in your mind, where did he get that kind of money? If you knew anything about Ames, there's 2 factories. One would not operate without the other. Plant 2 made the shovels, handles. They made the handles. And when they got the wood in there, big logs. So they made them from scratch. And most of it, I think, was ash. Which ash is a nice wood, too.
Yeah.
But anyway, and plant 1 made the actual shovels. Well, they made shovels, hoes, rakes, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And then they joined the handles too in plant 1, and plant 2 was the making the handles. So you had to buy both plants to have because one didn't operate without the other. And he bought both of them. But the money he gets, his wife came into a small inheritance in the mid-1940s. And that was nothing major. It was a nice chunk of change for the 40s. But it was not something you're going to live off of the rest of your life. It was somewhere around $2,000 to $3,000. Which you could buy a brand new house back then for that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But you was broke again.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it had a very real limitation
Yeah,
what you could do with it.
Right.
But it was a nice chunk of change back then. And anyway, she got this inheritance and she turned it all over to him. He starts playing the stock market. From about 45 to about 53, this country was really booming.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything was booming. Because World War II was over and all this, people had money from working during the war, had no place to spend it, and they was looking for some place to spend this money and something to spend the money on. So these factories were operating about 110, 120% of what they was designed to do. And he starts investing in the stock market.
Yeah.
And in 5 years, he says, he buys the shovel plant. And
Wow.
the final I-dotting and T-crossing and everything was done. And I'm not sure who they was playing, but it was a Parkersburg High School football game on a Friday night. They had been negotiating all day long. And Bernard says, and this is around 4 o'clock in the evening, said, why don't we go out and get something to eat? We got a football game here in town tonight. Let's go and take in the football game and have a little break from this. And everyone says, that sounds good. So they did. And everything got so relaxed and everything at the football game, they finished their negotiations at the football game. Which was probably a smart move on Bernard's part. You get them out in a more relaxed, as far as business goes. And anyway, he bought the plant. Now he's got money to play with.
Yeah. All right. Now you got a factory. Yeah.
And here was his playground.
Let's see. So you handed me a picture or a paper. It says McDonough Corporation Holdings traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Ames, largest shovel plant in the world in Parkersburg, Plum Tools, Philadelphia. Endicott Johnson Shoes. So you get into all this stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Gulf Coast Portland Cement, Houston Shell and Concrete, Marmac, McDonough Marine in New Orleans, Drumlin Castle in Ireland. Wow, he bought it. That's the castle picture over there.
Yeah, that's it.
He owned that whole castle. Well, he really did get some money, didn't he?
And that was a spur of the moment purchase too.
Oh, he got real rich. Wow. McDonough Construction, Atlanta, Georgia. And see, more stock holdings, Bank of Boston. Wow, personal holdings, Parkersburg Rig and Reel. Man, he owned a lot. I bet his descendants still own some of this, don't they?
No, most of this has been sold.
Okay.
But he was very diversified too.
I see.
And the corporation he formed is still in existence. He never dissolved that. But before in the late 70s, he starts liquidating. I say late 70s, from about 77 on, he just started getting ready for retirement. And he's liquidating, but the families said they didn't want to sell the castle. And so he agreed. He didn't want to get rid of the castle either. And the company is still in existence. He did not dissolve the company. And the company right now still has about 4 companies under their control. And I think the excess money goes to, he set up a trust for the kids.
Yeah.
And he did it smartly too. He said, I've seen too many trust funds of multi-million dollars in the funds go belly up in a year because they had unlimited access. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He told the kids, you will not have that in this.
Okay.
You're going to receive a check every month, like everybody else that works, like a paycheck. You get one check a month.
Smart.
And if you can't live off of that, you're going to have to go and get yourself a job.
Yeah. I bet they're still getting those checks, aren't they?
But it's a very, it was a very lucrative check. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something that you just existed on.
Sure. 50 years later, they're still getting it, and then their grandchildren will still get it.
Some of the kids are still living.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
His daughter is still living, and now she's an adopted daughter. And I tell people when it comes to adoption, she hit the jackpot when she got adopted into this family.
That's right.
And she's still living in the old home place, which is right here. Now, you can't hardly see it now, but the picture up on the wall there at the top.
Yeah.
Between the windows. It was the old home place. That's where she grew up. She's living there now herself. 7 or 8 years ago, she had the house redone.
Where is that?
It's out off of Rosemar Road.
Okay.
Well, you know where McDonough Park and everything is out in there.
Yeah.
Well, that was named after him because he donated that land.
Okay.
So anyway, right out in there is where she lives. And the house was built in the 1960s. Uh-huh. So the electrical system is obsolete for now.
Okay.
You know, all the computers and different appliances now that you didn't have then. Mm-hmm. And she had the electrical system completely redone, upgraded.
Sure.
Heating, air conditioning, upgraded. And I think she did a little bit of cosmetic stuff too, because she spent $1 million upgrading the house. So she did some pretty serious. A couple months or so after the house was completed, she wrote a check to Wheeling Jesuit College up in Wheeling for $6 million. Now there's $7 million she spent just in a few months.
Wow.
And
well, she's got some investments of her own.
Her estimated income, and she won't admit one way or the other. And I don't blame her, it's nobody's business. That's just between her and the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
But her estimated income is $25 million a year.
Unbelievable. All these years later.
And some of the money's coming from her dad yet, but she's also a businesswoman in her own right.
Yeah.
So now he also formed a foundation here in town.
Okay.
And money goes to, primarily to nonprofit, but it will go to some small business owners that have run into a temporary financial bind. Sometimes they will give them money.
Mm-hmm.
The report I've heard, the last, and this has been 15 years ago, that there was $35 million in that fund. And
Nice.
that'll draw you a nice interest check at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And from the way I understand it, it's set up till all the money comes in about the same time, around the end of the month. Around November and December, the money starts coming in. So that by January, they're set up to start taking requests again. Any money that they don't spend out of that goes into principal. The principal can't be touched under any circumstances.
Right. So it just keeps growing, right?
And that's basically the way the trust is. But I think some of this money goes into the trust fund for the kids, and probably some of it from the corporation even goes into the...
It's quite a turnaround off of $2,000, huh?
Now, when he set up the trust fund for the kids, he didn't put his wife in that.
He didn't?
And there wasn't any problems. Him and his wife sat down and they talked about it. And she says, I don't want in that trust fund. And he said, are you sure? She says, absolutely, I'm sure. I've got enough money of my own. She said, I'm approaching retirement age myself, so I don't have a whole lot of years left. 20, 30, 40 years, but nothing like she's already lived through.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I've got enough money of my own, I'm going to have a hard time spending it. Her personal income was estimated at $35 to $40 million. That was her money. She said, I don't need that trust fund.
Yeah. You can live on that. Yeah.
And she says gives more money to the kids.
Yeah. Wow.
So, now upon his death, he died in 1986.
86, okay.
Is when he passed away. His net income, now this was just the money he had control over. It wasn't necessarily family income. And I don't think that trust fund and the foundation was figured into that, because but this time were separate entities.
Okay.
But his personal income or wealth was estimated at 100 million plus.
Wow.
I think he solved the problem of being poor.
I think so, yeah. Good way to look at it, yeah.
I mean, well, you can see that 100 million right here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And some of these were big name companies.
Yeah, huge, yeah.
So,
Wow. I'm sure that castle wasn't cheap.
he told what it was. It was